again and welcome to Cup of Joe. As always, I'm your host, Jason McNeil. Now today on the show, I want to talk about what I would consider a fairly shocking piece of legislation. Some people may not consider it all that alarming. I don't know. To me, it's pretty big. So basically what I want to talk about is Bill 89, and it's called the Supporting Youth and Families Act. It's an Ontario act. It's an Ontario bill being put forward by the Liberal government, and I believe it's very problematic to me, okay? Now, it's called, as I said, the Supporting Youth and Families Act, but it doesn't really support youth and families. What it supports is the government's concept that it co-parents your children, or that the children belong to the state more so than they do to you. Now, why would I say that? Okay, I would say that because it basically, it's gonna dictate or regulate what the state views as a legitimate cause to take your kids away, to remove your kids from your custody and to take over raising them. Now, the problem with that is, obviously, just like it's defined as what's in the best interest of the child, right? So it's going to redefine what's in the best interest of the child, and it's going to define it as with a sort of sweeping, a broad base of criteria. So essentially, what's in the best interest of the child regarding physical, mental, emotional, and development needs. Sounds fine, right? Fairly innocuous. What's in the best interest of the child going forward, growing up, physically, mentally, developmentally, all of that. Here's the catch, right? The criteria is going to be, considerations will be race, creed, ancestry, family diversity, ethnic origin, citizenship, color, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. Now, you'll notice religion has been removed from there, right? So religion will not be considered, even though you as a parent may consider religion very important to the development of your child going forward. That's not important. What's important is all of these things mentioned. Now, my concern here, okay, is that I feel like it sort of singles out only one religion, because one religion is looked at as, oh, well, this is sort of the Canadian way. This is the Canadian thing, so that's the government purview, whereas other religions and races and creeds and such are not viewed as this is just the Canadian way, so you would consider you came from a different place. So that would be considered in whether or not it could take you out of your family, right? Well, if you came from Canada, you don't have that same protection then, right? Because you came from here. So you grew up here and you know the rules here. This to me means that now you have a different criteria for what would be considered Canadian children and other children. People that migrated here, people that have different cultures, backgrounds, whatever you might, consider not Canadian, and again, I consider everyone to be Canadian that's here. It may be naive, but I'm just saying that if your culture is perceived as not Western, you might have more protection than if your culture is perceived as Western. That doesn't seem right to me in terms of what I can and can't teach my kid. Now, the other problem is that you talk about things now where you remove religion, you bring in things like gender issue, gender identity, gender expression, and all of this stuff, right? Which to me now starts to look like a bit of a conspiracy, right? And I'll explain why. Look, I don't want to be the tinfoil hat guy, but look, we have a Liberal government in Ontario that started with sex ed, right? And one of the big complaints to the sex education was the idea of 6 genders, or more than 2 genders, or 3 genders, and teaching kids that there's many different genders, and you can identify, and it's fluid, and you can switch, and all of this stuff. But that was called homophobic and and bigoted, because you can teach your kids whatever you want at home. We're just telling them this, but you can teach them whatever you want at home. The next step, let's remove mother and father from public documents and such, because mother and father, it's just a parent. You're a parent. There's no difference between mom and dad, and you don't want to marginalize anyone that's not a traditional nuclear family. So let's remove mom and dad, because apparently explaining that Jimmy has 2 dads might be confusing to all the kids, but explaining that there is no mom and dad and that there is no difference between the male parent and the female parent, that doesn't confuse kids at all. That's perfectly normal. Okay, so that's the next step. And now comes the third step, and that's that when my kid comes home or your kid comes home and they're confused about gender or their gender identity or how to express their gender, you are now going to be limited by the state in what you can say to them. You can't tell them, no, you know what, you're not supposed to wear the dress, or whatever it is that your beliefs are. You can't sort of try to raise the kid in that image, because that could be considered abuse. I know that sounds silly, right? Michael Coteau, the minister of, I believe it's youth services, I would consider that abuse. when a child identifies one way and a caregiver is saying, no, you need to do this differently. Two problems with that, okay? One is the child is identifying and the child is deciding, and children don't decide. Bill Nye, the science guy, will tell you that at 3 or 4, a child can start to express and tell you what their gender is. And it doesn't have to be the gender that assigns to the sex they were born with. It could be anything. Okay, so a 3-year-old can tell me what gender they are, having, knowing what a 3-year-old knows, and I can't sort of try to guide them away from what the state believes, because that would be abuse, right? That's the first problem. Second problem is you are a caregiver, right? If you listen to the statement, a caregiver, not a parent. You're not the mother of the child or the father of the child. You're a caregiver for the child. That's all you are. We're co-parents with the state, and you're a caregiver. And when you are not fulfilling your duties as the state sees fit, they can take your kids away because you're abusing them. Now, this is only like a year or 2 from having the debate where people are giving their kids hormones, right? Where the male child identifies as a female, and at ages as young as 7, 8, and 9, they're being given hormones so that they don't develop the testosterone biologically, and so that it doesn't affect their feeling like a woman or feeling like a man going forward. And that discussion, by many, would be considered that the parents are abusing that kid. But the state, or Ontario, they want to flip that on its head and say, no, you might be abusing that kid if you don't give them hormones to help them develop in the way that they said they should, and if you don't let them wear the dress in the way that they said they want to. All of that stuff. This is none of the government's business, right? But that's what they're doing. This is the next step forward in making sure that you don't have the right to raise your kids as you see fit. That's how I feel about it. Again, it's the Supporting Youth and Families Act. It's Bill 89, Ontario government. I'd love to know what you guys think. Hit me up on the Twitter at Cup of Joe Canada, or feel free to subscribe and leave a comment.